Hi everyone. In my video today, I'm going to be going over my Visual Studio Code extension called Wingman, which is an AI coding assistant. Wingman offers a similar experience to GitHub Copilot, except without a subscription. Wingman is designed to run using Ollama, which is a software that allows you to host large language models locally on your computer, as well as supporting other popular providers such as OpenAI or Hugging Face. We'll go through what the extension is, where it's at in development, some of the current features and how to use them, and what you can expect in the future. Let's jump into the video here. So I've got the page open for the Wingman AI extension here. Wingman AI is, again, it's an extension for VS Code. And the intent of it is to allow similar results that you would get with GitHub Copilot without having to pay for the monthly fee and being able to host the AI locally on your machine. So if we go down to the Get Started guide here and we kind of just start with getting started, the first thing is to install the extension, which is the page we're on now. Install Ollama. So Ollama, if you're not familiar with it, is a really simple application that you can run, and I believe it's using Docker internally. It will use Docker and it will host various AI models on your computer that you can use, communicate with either through um, like the CLI or through their APIs. I believe there's even an Ollama chat application out there, so you can put like a web interface over these models. But Ollama is a solid product that offers you lots of different models where you can, come in here, you can search for models, and you can really see kind of, all different variations of models too, right? So choosing a large language model is a little bit about what are your, compute and your machine constraints for the model. So as an example, if I wanted a model that's really good at code completion, such as DeepSeek, I can come in here and I can look at DeepSeek Coder. And if I go over to tags, there'll be a number of different models that I can download here. Like, how do I know which ones to choose, right? So I might have found a model that I'm interested in, and I come over here and I want to install the model, and I can follow their guidance here and I can install it. It shows me, an example post request here that I can interact with the model. But how do I know which model is right for me? This is not a comprehensive guide on choosing the right model. If you go over to the Wingman Getting Started guide, we basically reference two different DeepSeek models, and you'll see that they're essentially the same. The key thing here is you'll see the model name, you'll see the size of the model, you'll see the type of model, if it's a base model or an instruct model, and then you'll see if it's a quantized model or not. So let's kind of break down what this is real quick, just so you know kind of what goes behind choosing them, why we chose the ones that we did, and if you want to go ahead and try a different one for various reasons, why you would do that. So the first parameter of the models here, besides the model name, is going to be the parameter count. So basically how those models are trained and the amount of information it's trained on. The lower the number, the less RAM that it's going to take up on your machine, right? So you're going to have potentially faster results that are less accurate because it has a smaller set of data to reference. So we start with 6.7, and that's what we recommend too on the page is 6.7. So the next part of it is base or instruct. So if you click on tags under the model, you could come in here, you can see base and instruct for most of these. And if you keep scrolling down, you'll see these cues and all of these different tags on it. So I'll just kind of go through this real quickly. The base model is a model that's trained more simply. It's trained on kind of raw data and not necessarily to follow instructions. So if you wanted to have a chat type experience, you would use an instruct model. And if you want to do something like code completion, instruct models can do them, but base models are more made for that, right? They're less instructed, they're less trained, less constrained. So the next piece to go over is the quantization, and the quantization, it's a weird word, is basically the precision of the model. So when you look at training data, the training data essentially equates to weights within the model, and the weights kind of tell it, how it can associate things. Well, when you look at the quantization models available, you'll see that one, the size of the Docker image changes, right? So you'll see, as this number goes up, the image goes up. Um, you'll also have different compute constraints here as well. So the lower this quantization number is, the obviously you could probably tell by just the size of the image, but again, less accuracy, less RAM. So if you're on a more constrained computer, you could start kind of stepping these numbers down. And then if it's still too much, you can even go down to the smaller model. You'll get faster results. They won't be as good, but they might be good enough for your application. So, going back to Olama, it's very easy to install. There's not a whole lot here that you have to do other than kind of download it. If you go over to their GitHub page, you can just click the GitHub link up here. They even have a start Olama section where you can run Olama serve. You'll know if it's running because you'll see Olama in your, toolbar, your taskbar, whatever. That'll be essentially letting you know that it's running. And then you can interact with it through their CLI. So you can run, Olama commands too, which is pretty cool. So you'll see here that we reference using Olama pull. Once it's installed and that CLI is hooked up, you can just pull models. You could pull updates for the models that way. And the really cool thing with Olama is that it will intelligently manage the models for you, meaning you're not really running both models at once. When you switch from one model to the other, it's managing those Docker containers for you, which is one of the really awesome parts about Olama, right? So you're pulling both models, but you don't need to have the compute to run both models at the same time, right? I mean, ideally, you have enough buffer for larger models, which is, a nice ideal scenario, but Olama will manage it for you, and there's nothing you have to do. So let's kind of keep going through the extension here. So in the extension, we have some videos just about kind of what this covers. I'll go over all this. We talk about why we chose Olama. I've already kind of went over some of that. I do talk about other models that Olama has that we support currently. Um, and again, here, the important thing to know is that models might have been tested with, certain configurations, but what's important is the model, right? If you want to run Code Llama instead of DeepSeek, you can. And you could choose, any variant of that model if you want. The important thing is that you want to use, a base model for code completion, and you want to use an instruct model for chat. So one of the things we're looking into in the future is, can we get it down to one model and still get good results? But currently that's just not something that is offering the best, performance and experience right now. So as we move down in the documents here, you'll see Hugging Face. This is another AI provider that we support. Hugging Face is nice because it will allow you to leverage some models for free. Basically, you can create an account, you create an API key, and you interact with it over REST. And you could use a number of different models on there. And some of these models are hosted beyond what they support in the free tier, which is nice. So as an example, most models have to be under 10 gigabytes in size for it to run. That will eliminate most models like DeepSeek. You can't spin that up for free, but they do host a lot of big premier models completely for free. Some of those models are like the Code Llama models and Mixtral, as an example, which is a very powerful model, right? It can do lots of different things very well. So these are the models we support for Hugging Face. The thing to note here with Hugging Face is that your data is not private, and the extension doesn't make any effort at all to sanitize your data. So if you're worried about sending company IP, or you're in a file with like API keys or passwords and you're typing, it will be sent over the network. It's just where the extension is right now. In the future, we do have plans to utilize maybe something like CodeQL and help try to strip out things that appear sensitive, but it's just something to be aware of. So Hugging Face is ideal if you need the larger model power. Maybe you need to switch over and use Mixtral for something which just has a larger context window, or maybe you just don't have the compute to run Olama, but you're not worried about, the data not being private. We also support OpenAI as well. So OpenAI is definitely a pretty nice solution in general. Again, your data is not private and it won't be sanitized, but you can use something like GPT-4 Turbo, which has a very large context window. It's very fast and it provides awesome results. So if you're familiar with GitHub Copilot, they're still running on GPT 3.5 for a lot of things. Some things run on GPT 4, like I believe the chat, but in terms of the code completion, that is running on an older model. So again, one of the nice things here is that if you want that power and you're okay with, your file or that data being sent over the network, this can be a really nice option too. And the other thing is you can toggle back and forth between these. You're not stuck using one or the other, right? It's just configuration, and I'll show you that within the tool. There's also an FAQ guide, there's a troubleshooting guide, and it just kind of goes over some simple things. So let's kind of go into the extension here and let's take a look at kind of what it looks like and how it works. So one of the first places to start is when the extension is installed and it's running, you'll see the little airplane icon over here on the right. Um, You'll also see Wingman down here on the bottom. And this is kind of a good indicator of like if it's doing something, right? You'll see this little spinning icon. I'll show you that. We also have this Wingman configuration. This is basically just a user interface into the Visual Studio Code settings. So you can figure this through the traditional VS Code settings pane. But if you don't want to do that and you want to have something that's just very quick and simple, you can also come in here. You could choose the different AI providers. You can configure things, you can choose different models, and you can do, pretty much anything you can do in the settings right here. Now, what's really nice about this is that sometimes you're tweaking things for performance. So on the right here, we have, a bunch of different things. One, you could turn off code completion. So again, if you're in a private code base, but you want to use Open API, maybe you want, or OpenAI, and you want to use it for chat. So you're using GPT-4 Turbo. You could turn off code complete, so it's not going to automatically send stuff over the wire until you explicitly do it in chat. Code streaming. Code streaming is a feature that will attempt to give you code completion results faster. So with code streaming, the idea is that as you're typing, it's trying to give you segments of the suggested code that could complete your code in pieces faster, right? Code context window. So this is basically just how much, and a lot of these have tooltips, but just going over them real quick. So code context window is how much of the surrounding text within the file is sent to the AI for it to analyze. Code max tokens. This is how much, this is the limit on how many tokens the AI will emit back to you, right, in the response. So this, necessarily, between these two settings here, I would say your context windows are are what's going to impact your performance. The larger the window, the slower it is. Max tokens will put some constraints on it. But, generally speaking, try and see what you get the best performance with, right? And you could tweak different models, you could tweak the context window and see like, hey, if you're a little constrained on hardware, how do you get the best performance? Chat context, window and max tokens are the same thing as code context, right? Chat has a larger context because it's not happening as often, right? Where code, we want to keep that window small and we want it to feel more responsive, where it's okay if you wait a little longer on chat, as long as it's accurate and it's giving you good results. All right, so we went through the configuration a little bit, and you can save right from here. It will reload the window, just as an FYI. This is a sample application that I've used in some of my other videos here, and I'm going to just go in and kind of do just kind of a brief, demonstration of some of the features. So in terms of code completion, it's enabled right now. And if I go in and I start typing here, let's say I go to add a new API route, you'll see in the bottom here, Wingman will be spinning the first time a model is loaded into memory. So it's basically kind of loading up that Docker image for the first time. There will be a significant delay. So be aware if you're going from code complete to chat, code complete to chat, back and forth, as Olama is managing those Docker images, right? There's going to be some delay. Now, by default, once you use it, it will stay alive, which is great. So you can see this is what the API suggested and it returned back to me. And you'll see that part of it's cut off here. Now this is, just obviously a fake route that I was adding to my Express server. This is just an Express server. If I hit tab, it'll, enter this code for me. Now, what's really interesting here again is that, I can come in and I can tweak things, right? So I can increase my context window and I can increase my max tokens. I can save it, let the window refresh. Now the extension has this new kind of configuration available to it. And I'll kind of re-trigger code completion here. And you'll see that it generated, more code this time, right? It's going out there and it's trying to generate more code. So I'm going to just kind of revert these back for now. I'll leave the max tokens up a little bit, and let's just kind of go in here and have like a smaller scope. So let's get rid of this route here. Let's go in here and say if, prompt. So we'll just kind of add, something simple. We'll let the code completion run. So it's running here. So you can see that it kind of came up with what it thinks the code completion should be. And what's interesting here is it's using the surrounding parts of the file, right? So if I came in here and I said something like model options and I let it run, what it'll do is it'll come in and it'll try to figure out, the context from the surrounding code. Now, of course, with code complete, it's very tough without giving it, large context, right? And again, you can increase your context window. So if I just bump this up to 1024, it's going to be a significantly larger context. So there'll be a performance hit for it, but it will be able to go in and try to determine more of what's around the file, right? So you can see here when I did that, I get, a little less noise because it's able to kind of like fit the file together a little bit more, has more context available to it. And again, this is not a real scenario, so this response here is not really useful. And if I jump down to the next line, I'll let it run again. And you can see this is, what it gave me as the output for code completion. What's also pretty cool here is that you don't necessarily need to always just kind of go to a new line and let it do code completion. So what I'm going to do is just kind of come up with like a fake scenario here. And I'm going to say, I have an array of something. And oops, let me change this here. And I want to loop through it. So I'm going to say loop through array and find, unique values. I'm just going to drop down to the next line here. And you'll see it'll write the code for me too. So I don't need to use a special command here. And it's basically just complaining about TypeScript here, right? So, this is pretty easily fixed, but you could see that I don't need to come in here and, use a special command or go into chat. I can kind of let it just use its normal, thought process and looking at the code, and it will use comments to kind of guide it and figure out what it's trying to do as well, which is really nice. So again, it's just, it's not like an explicit feature. It's just the AI is smart enough to do that. And it's just kind of a nice little side effect here, right? You don't have to use a special command. You can just type a comment. So I'm going to go through some other things in here. So they've got, again, this is from like another video. But here's a really good example. So I've got this function here, and I really wish it had comments because I don't really know what the code does. And what I'm going to do is open the quick fix menu. In the quick fix menu here, we try to prefix it with this plain icon just so it kind of stands out. We have only so much control of the icons, but you can see document using Wingman. So I'm going to click that. You'll notice at the bottom, it'll say generating docs and the Wingman icon will be spinning as well. And this takes a little bit. So this will use the chat model. So Olama is again, kind of switching Docker images on it. So the first kind of generation of it is going to take a little while, right? Because it's got to spin up that model. And you can see here that these are the docs that it generated for it. And it did a really good job, right? Now this will work very well in a language like TypeScript. And basically, it will give you a pretty good summary. Type your parameters, type your returns, and this works really, really well. So it's using that, TSDoc, JSDoc syntax, and it's, something you can just go through your code base and, continuously add add documents to. So one of the other features I'm going to talk about is the refactor feature. So the refactor feature is still pretty early in development. There's a number of different features we want to add to it. So it admittedly won't always give you the right answer or an answer that even is code complete, right? And I say this with a little asterisk because it's a very interesting challenge. Having used GitHub Copilot, I've never really used their refactor because I've always just felt like it never really gave the right response, never gave a good response, and it just didn't have enough context usually to do what I wanted it to do. And currently with the current version of refactor, we kind of have the same issue. But we do have a lot of plans to support being able to get good context across your project. It is something we are working on, but how you use refactor, so you can just highlight a section of code, and in the kind of context or like this quick fix or code actions menu, it's got a couple names in my mind. I can hit refactor. You'll see it'll say refactoring down here, and you'll see it start spinning. And in this case, it's using the chat model. So you just want to be aware that like chat settings, and this goes for document generation too, they do use the chat model. It's going to be using that context window, those max tokens. So just be aware, if you set it too much, you might end up with a, kind of an undesired result. And if I undo the code here or redo the code here, this is effectively what its code suggestion was. So in this particular case, it's not really cleaning up much in the code. The code's, a little, you can see it's actually more code here. One of the things it's doing though is it's trying to handle, an additional error case, right? So the cool thing with the refactor part, and again, like you'll notice too, it actually adds the return type, right? So there are a couple scenarios where like refactor does really well. There's a couple, scenarios and more complex scenarios when it tries to break things out into like separate methods where it doesn't do too well. And that's just something to be aware of, is that it's a work in progress, right? It's not going to be perfect, and it's on the roadmap to improve it. So that kind of highlights a lot of the major features. Let's talk about chat a little bit. So chat is pretty cool because it's effectively going to do what Copilot does, and it's going to pull the current file and the current line you're on, and it's going to give that to the large language model to be able to try to figure out how to do what you're asking it to do. So if I come in here and I do the same thing I'm doing with refactor, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to just ask it to ask it to write a unit test. You'll see that it'll come in here. It'll let me know kind of which file I'm on, and it'll give me the context for it. So I'm going to actually just unhighlight it, and you can actually click here, and it'll show you what you sent to it, which is nice. So if you're on another part of the file, it'll highlight it for you. It's just something simple. And what's interesting here is I just said write a unit test. Now it'll go out and it'll make some assumptions about like, you know, the test, what it should do, things like that. And you basically get this result here where you can copy. So you have some kind of quick actions on each little code block here. So if I like these tests and I want this test, I could copy it and I could go paste it in a file. I could also click here to send to new file, and it'll paste these tests into a new file for me. And then I just save it with the right extension. So, it knows it's TypeScript. So that's kind of a nice feature here. You don't have to just use it for writing tests. You can click this little button up here too to clear chat. And you can also ask it questions here. So let's ask it, let's pretend we want to use an NPM package. And I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind, Redux. So we can ask it, are you familiar with Redux? And what's cool here is you could ask it questions like this to get an idea of what it's trained on, right? So you may not think about it, but like sometimes large language models hallucinate and they make things up. Well, now you can go in and you can kind of ask it, right? And you could say like, are you familiar with this? And you almost know right away that if it says yes, there's a very good chance that it's familiar with probably a version that you're interested in using. It's the second part. And then the third part is, well, when I ask it how to do things, it's probably going to give me really good, solid answers, right? So You can also ask it follow-up questions here, just like you would think a normal chat would work. I can say, you show me an example using Redux Toolkit. And I don't know if it's familiar with Redux Toolkit. Let's see here. It looks like it is. So it'll come in here and it'll give me a code example, and basically I can stop the chat down here if I want to. It will try to detect if like you've scrolled. It will stop automatically scrolling if you've scrolled. There's a couple of things, just bugs and things that we're kind of working out here still. We're just trying to go for a solid user experience. And you'll see like it gives me almost the whole entire example of how to implement it, which is super cool, right? So this is sometimes really nice to not have to go look up documentation. How do I use your package? You're going through, you're hoping the docs are up to date, or you're, condensing down maybe multiple pages of it. So it's just really great for that type of use case too. Other things you can do here too, again, like if you don't want to highlight the code explicitly, it will try to figure out where you're at in the file and like what you're trying to do just based on your cursor position. So something I can do here is I can say, do I need to decode with stream set to true? And you'll notice here that the lines are a lot bigger, right? So it's effectively pulling in this large of a chunk of file to try to answer the question, right? So it's pulling in kind of as much as it thinks it should pull in, again, based on your settings here. So you can keep increasing these. The risk is that if you exceed the model's context length, how many tokens it can fit in memory, um, you're going to get some crazy responses. So it's good to just be a little cautious. The context window here, just to be clear, it's not a one-to-one with token count, right? So if your model handles, I don't know, 4,000 tokens or whatever, um, these are not tokens. This is just pure character count. So we don't yet do a token estimation on there. It's a tricky process, but it is something we're working on and just trying to test for accuracy. Um, you'll see it'll give me the response here of kind of whatever I typed in. It will save this too, so you should be able to close out of it. You should be able to come back in and chat will work. What's really cool too is I can come in here and I can say like, can you, refactor, refactor this for readability and performance, right? So again, I can give it, just a very specific piece of code and then, try to see what it comes up with. It might be better, might not be better, but you could see in this case here, this is actually pretty good, and is cleaner than the code that I have, right? And this is again using DeepSeek Coder, which by the way, definitely stick with the defaults. DeepSeek is one of the best large open source large language model coders out there. I would not change the model. I would use it, and then get comfortable with the results, and then you can make decisions once you have kind of a baseline. So in this particular case, right, it's just as easy for me to come over here, and you'll notice that it includes a function. So like it's thinking about putting this into a function, um, and it returns the steps out of it. So it's not kind of a one for one, right? There's code that's outside of the function that I didn't give it, So like if I go back and I highlight the whole function, and I'm just gonna repaste my question in here. Let's just see, how it does with the entire function. So you can see it gives kind of the same results here. Now it doesn't really know anything about matches. It expects matches to be passed into it. So, technically I could, come down here and I could say something like return process steps matches, and I could just, refactor the code here. It's just going to complain that it has an any type, but effectively that's kind of the direction that it's pushing me down here with the example. So in here, it'll kind of give you, some of its reasoning for it. Again, it's not always perfect, right? This is a small, you know, 10, 12 gigabyte model that's running on my Mac locally. It's not, multi, billion dollar open AI model, right? So For what it is, it's very good. It's very capable, and you can really get crafty with the wording here. Chat is very powerful, and you can let chat run in the background while you're working, right? So, if you come in here and you ask it a question and you say, like, oh, okay, just use refactor again, refactor this for me. You could go into another file here, you could be in here, working away, doing kind of whatever on it, and just kind of let it go through and, do whatever it needs to do, right? So it's also really good at, and you could switch tabs too, you can go back to it. So it's really good at just kind of offloading something and then coming back to it, right? Even if you're on less powerful hardware and you want to run something that is expensive, right? You got a larger context window, it's a more expensive problem. You could paste code in here, whatever you error messages, whatever you want to do, and let it run in the background and go do whatever you want to do on, writing code, whatever. And you can come back to this and then look at the result. So it's just, again, just different ways to think about chat and the value that it offers. So this pretty much wraps up the video. Some of the additional features we're looking to add here in the extension is better refactoring, better type awareness, better performance, potentially sanitizing some of the inputs. And we look to add some other features that we don't want to kind of come out and announce here yet, where we want the AI to really kind of engage with you, right? We want a experience where you're not always kind of asking the AI for things, that the AI is able to actively suggest things. And it's a pretty interesting concept. And of course, because these large language models are so expensive to run hardware wise, it's a really kind of fine balance of how we interact with the large language model. But if you haven't tried Wingman, you should definitely go and try it out. It's a great extension. We are, currently under development for it. If you do run into issues, go ahead and open an issue on the repo. If you like the extension, please rate it in the marketplace. And if you run into any issues, again, we'll be happy to take a look at it for you. Thank you.